This is a small video where I'm presenting my small case study I did for my last paper for this class. I decided to use the SLA theory that's based on Stephen Krashen's hypothesis on effective filtering. The effective filtering hypothesis is one of the 5 elements of Krashen's monitor model. That's Stephen Krashen, by the way. The monitor model includes 5 parts. The first part is the acquisition learning hypothesis. The second one is the natural order hypothesis. The third one is the monitor hypothesis. Number 4 is the input hypothesis, and number 5 is the effective filter hypothesis. The effective filter hypothesis, again, is what I used in my case study. I wanted to give a little background. Professor Stephen Krashen, I hope I'm saying his name correctly. I never say the names correctly, but I hope this time I do. Anyway, he was the emeritus professor of linguistics and education at the University of Southern California. And he is quite famous in the educational world for his theories on second language learning. His effective filter hypothesis in particular has been used as a subject for several studies. I did include in my paper, as was required, 5 references that speak about the studies have been done looking at the effective filter process and its effects. Fortunately, I did find enough studies that actually prove his theory. To be specific, the conclusions and findings of all these studies provides cumulative quantitative and qualitative data that supports his theory on the effects of effective filtering, especially in the second language learning classroom setting. I also was able to conduct my own study on 2 men who live and work in the United States who are here from Spanish-speaking countries. My 2 participants' names were Juan and Jose. Juan is from Mexico. He moved here about 3 years ago. He speaks some English. Most of the English he speaks, he learned from watching American movies and listening to American songs. He grew up in Mexico, and of course Spanish was his first language, and I would consider him a beginner learner. Jose is from Guatemala, and he's been here about 10 years. He also speaks some English, a tad bit more, I would say, than Juan, but not much more. He learned most of his English from American movie songs and from work experience in the United States. Spanish, of course, was his first language also, and he too, I would categorize him as a beginner learner. Jose and Juan are actually neighbors and live in a neighborhood that speaks predominantly Spanish. Just to make note, the neighborhood consists of stores and, I'll say stores and community areas where the people living there, shopping there, are Spanish speaking. So both Juan and Jose are exposed to quite a bit of Spanish. Not necessarily motivated to learn English in those settings, but definitely highly motivated to learn English so that they can actually get better jobs, which is basically why they want to learn English. They actually, made in my observation notes, they actually prefer to speak Spanish. They feel they just feel like it's a more expressive language for them, obviously. And they practice it, and are exposed to it and listen to it on a daily basis. All right, moving forward. I did include primary standards and objectives. The secondary standards were mostly used for reference for ideas, research, and interpretations. Concerning the primary standards that were covered in the classroom, just to make some notes, number 1, referring to that one, I did use observation tools to evaluate the second language learning acquisition process. Concerning 1B, primary standard 1B, I did use systemic research methods that included both pre and post test designs, plus interviews, to learn more about the participants' language acquisition process and learning trajectories. And concerning primary standard number 2, identification markers were used in the study in order to establish the role that culture plays in the learner's acquisition of second language by using Mexican music in the first setting only. That would be the pre-test design. Skipping to the research design. So concerning the research design, I used two different settings. The first one I consider the pre-test. The second one I consider the post-test design feature of the study. Both settings were used to collect data and compare the different effects notable in the different settings, along with data collected and observations with interviews and activities that both Jose and Juan took part in. And basically, the research was designed to lower the effective filter and take data to support its effects. In the design of this research, the criteria I used is the following. I wanted to provide written and oral instruction. I wanted to provide an activity that was interesting and intriguing to the participant. Let's go back to the first one. So providing both written and oral instruction, I made sure that I gave handouts, and then I also, read the instructions, and I also walked through verbally all of the exercises, questions, whatnot. Okay, going on to number 2, provide an activity that was interesting and intriguing to the participant. So one of the exercises that was used in both settings was a dialogue, and I curtailed the dialogue between Jose and Juan. How do I say that? They was designed so that they were dialoguing with each other as if they were in a work setting. I figured that would make it more interesting and intriguing to both of them. And number 3, provide materials that relate to the participants' real life as much as possible. Again, that's the same intention as I just described for number 2. And also, I guess I could say I also kept the questions that were, specific to their lives. Number 4, allow for and encourage a relaxed atmosphere that is appropriate. So the first warm-up exercise that I used for both setting 1 and setting 2 was for the two of them to get to know each other, pretend that they hadn't known each other previously, and greet each other in Spanish and in English. So they could be more relaxed. As I described earlier, they both were very clear about their preference to speak Spanish and how much more easier it was for them. And so I encouraged that in the beginning of the warm-up exercise so they could feel a little bit more relaxed. I also included Spanish music in background for the first setting, for the first location, again to encourage a relaxed atmosphere. Spanish-speaking people tend to like music. That's not to say other cultures don't, but I would say that this, the results did show that this actually had an effect on lowering the effective filter. That was more of a culturally sensitive approach that I used for this study. Number 5, refrain from orally correcting the participant. I made sure that I didn't correct them. I might have asked them if they understood the question and understood their answer, but I refrained from any kind of correcting, and I let them know that I wasn't going to do anything like that throughout the whole time we were conducting this study. Number 6, reinforce the idea that language acquisition takes time and there's no expectation for perfection. I made sure they understood this wasn't a class per se where they were going to be graded or anything like that. Again, I mentioned that I did meet with them for about 45 minutes each time. I didn't want to feel like we were being rushed, so I made sure we had enough time to get through all of the different activities. As I described earlier, we did meet for about 45 minutes at a community center located in their community where most of the people in that community spoke predominantly Spanish. And this was designed on purpose. And then in the second meeting, we met at a community center that was located in a community where the community members spoke mostly English. I wanted to see if that could have some sort of effect, and it appeared that it did. I did conduct the same exercises, interviews, activities, whatnot for both of them, so that I could have a more of an apples to apples comparison. I played music, as I said in the first one, to give more of a relaxed atmosphere. I kept it very low so that it wouldn't be distracting. And basically, I took notes, compared inputs that I got from both participants, and I used this data to show that lowering the affective filter does in fact make a difference in language competence and ability to increase language competence. Basically, the data revealed that the perceived level of success and affective filter attributes correlated to their perceived levels of success. Included in the paper is a section on implications and conclusions of this case study, which I basically have been hinting throughout this discussion that it actually was proven, but that by lowering the affective filter, the second language learner does gain knowledge, more knowledge, when the affective filter is not, compared to when the affective filter is not lowered. I'm basically happy to report that this study proved Christian's affective filter hypothesis. I was able to observe 2 adult participants who were motivated to learn English, and the results strongly suggest that when the affective filter was lowered, they both were able to use their target language more frequently and more comfortably. One of the questions I had at the end for both Juan and Jose indicated to me that, again, that although they were highly motivated to learn English, they did much better with some music in the background that they're familiar with. They actually did much better when they were in a setting where they felt like, more familiar with the environment in terms of the people, the community, Spanish-speaking versus the English-speaking community, which I found was interesting. And I do want to add one important point is that their competence was actually better the first time we met rather than the second time we met. One could presume that they would be better the second time, being that they had had a chance to get familiar with myself, with the process, with the exercises. As I said, I purposely designed my research so that the exercises and activities were exactly the same. And interesting enough, they did better the first setting with the music, with the environment, being in their community, as compared to the second one. So again, that for me was proof that the affective filter hypothesis was proven in this study, and that there is, this is a great tool basically for teachers to use, to be aware of, and to use in any second language learning classroom. Whatever they can do to reduce the anxiety of their students will definitely be beneficial to the teacher as well as the students. Thank you so much.